Anthem is finally here. Ish. What you're seeing is actually the Anthem VIP Demo, which ran through the weekend. Ran being a generous term. Look at that bar go! Wait, no, it stopped. Anyway, the point of this was to give the people who pre-ordered the game an early look, since launch is only a few weeks away. Naturally, I couldn't help but jump in. In case you don't know, Anthem is an upcoming online shooter from BioWare, reminiscent of games like Destiny or Warframe. In it, you play as a freelancer who pilots a Javelin, which is a high-powered exosuit that basically makes you Iron Man. So hop into your what most assuredly has to be a very sweaty suit. Ew. And go kill some stuff. In Anthem, you and 3 other players, if you feel like teaming up with other people, you don't have to, will take on missions, kill enemies, gather loot, and crash into things. I was really good at crashing into things. I'm not sure if that's something to be proud of. Sadly, the VIP demo was not a completely accurate representation of what Anthem will be at launch, but it's pretty freaking close. First off, we're not starting at the beginning. In the demo, we started off at level 10 and were capped at level 15. We didn't get to experience much of the story, we're limited to a few missions, 2 free play areas, 1 dungeon, and only got to use 2 javelins. I've also read that the demo was a bit easier than the actual game will be at launch, which is odd. I can't say I found the demo to be all that easy, especially if you weren't in a full group. This is footage of Tokunut and I taking on a boss on normal difficulty by ourselves. If you could hear the audio right now, it would sound like screaming. The demo starts you out in an area called Fort Tarsus. And after some story, you'll hop into your Javelin where you'll choose a mission, a difficulty, invite any friends you want to take along, and off you go. I find the gameplay of Anthem to be pretty fun. Running around, gunning, using skills, the word which no matter how I pronounce, someone tells me I'm wrong, so I'm just gonna pronounce it wildly incorrect throughout the rest of the video. Merla. All of it plays and works like you'd expect it to. Guns and Marble have impact, and whenever something explodes, it's very satisfying. Then there's flying. Probably one of the coolest and most popular features of Anthem, flying is great once you get used to it. Now, I was playing on a PC with a mouse and keyboard, and for the first hour or so, I ran into everything. I've heard it's much easier with a controller, but I stuck with it and eventually got to a point where it was pretty natural. At that point, flying starts to become second nature, and you'll find yourself using it to help zip you around battles. Flying in and slamming down on the ground superhero style and ripping through enemies is a lot of fun. You're like the Rocketeer! Ask your parents, kids. I will say that you can't fly forever. Eventually, you'll overheat, causing you to crash to the ground. I felt as you traveled around, you would overheat far too quickly. It's not terrible, it's just an annoyance. In the demo, I was only able to experience 2 of the 4 javelins. Everyone started out as the Ranger, a more balanced javelin with some decent attack and defense. And then for my second choice, I went with the Interceptor, a Melar DPS-focused javelin, mainly because I wanted to see how close-range combat worked in Anthem, and because look at that butt! I've been working out. I was very happy to see that these did feel very different from each other in terms of gameplay. The Ranger felt like it was made to be played as a ranged class, and doing some decent AoE damage with some of its skills. The Interceptor felt weaker at range, but get in close and it did some massive damage, with many of its skills being close-range single-target attacks. Oh yeah, each Javelin has 3 skills for you to use, 2 attack-related and 1 support-related. These vary depending on which Javelin you choose, so I won't go over all of them, but the ones I had were grenades, a small missile launcher, throwing stars, electrified dashes, damage protection or damage increasing bubbles, and damage control breaks. Each Javelin also has its own ultimate ability, which charges slowly over time. Once ready, you can unleash it for a pretty devastating attack. The Ranger shoots a barrage of missiles at basically anything in his line sight, and the Interceptor becomes a whirlwind of death, slicing and dicing her way through basically anything. Using an ultimate makes you invincible and fully restores your shield and health. Dear other players, don't forget about your ultimate ability. It can single-handedly change the tide of battle. Please, for the love of all that is holy, use it! For the final few hours of the demo, Anthem opened up all of the Javelins for players to try out. So I got in a very quick round with both the Storm and the Colossus. The Storm was a freaking blast, no pun intended, and played like a floating badass wizard. The Storm actually encourages you to hover around in flying mode, which increases its shield strength. Hovering is usually only meant for short bursts, as it'll end up overheating you, but not the Storm. It heats up very slowly, allowing you to hover for an extended period of time. This was probably my favorite class, and I regret not picking it earlier. Shooting charged up AoE fireballs and blasting multiple enemies with spheres of fire just felt awesome. The Storm is a very aptly named Javelin, as their ultimate ability calls down ice, fire, and lightning to just destroy anything within this dome. I really enjoyed this one. The Colossus, on the other hand, was just not something in my wheelhouse. This Javelin is able to use some guns that others aren't, such as the grenade launcher and the autocannon, so I tried those out. And it's alright, it's just not for me. The Colossus does in fact feel a bit more tanky, boasting a lot of health, and my support ability was a taunt to get enemies to come after me. And my ultimate was a giant freaking cannon. Again, very cool, just not for me. The missions in Dungeon were fairly routine for the genre. Follow the waypoints, kill a bunch of guys, protect a spot, gather some items, and then move on to the next spot, eventually coming to a boss. Kill them and the mission ends, leading to a screen where you'll see how much experience you got, some awards, I don't know what they mean, and what items you picked up. Then it's back to Fort Tarsus to continue your story, and re-outfit your Javelin with new equipment and skills. Equipment comes in a couple different rarity levels and power levels with different bonuses attached. Basically, put on the best ones or just the ones you like. Though the higher the power level, the stronger they'll be, so don't get too attached. Unwanted pieces of equipment can be broken down into parts, which can then be used to craft new pieces of equipment. This also applies to your skills, which are switched out a lot like weapons or any other piece of gear. I like being able to pick different skills depending on the situation, however, I always want the best skill equipped, and if my favorite isn't the best, then that's not good. As far as equipment goes, there's nothing really new here. Your Javelin can also be customized with a variety of different materials, colors, overlays, and even different pieces. That way you won't look exactly the same as everyone else. It's not a perfect system, but it works. Again, I think all of this combined is a lot of fun, and I've been enjoying my time with Anthem. But not everything is great here. I do have some issues. No, I'm not going to talk about the bugs and demo issues. I suspect a lot of those will be fixed by launch. At least I hope so. Instead, I'm going to talk about issues I have with the game itself. First, Fort Tarsus. This part of the game where you're stuck in first person, walking around very slowly, with no other players around, just feels off to me. It's a stark contrast from the rest of the game. I've read there's a hub area being introduced in the game where you'll see other players and such. That's great. I don't like Fort Tarsus. Second, the open world feels really empty. Flying around in free play mode is a lot of fun, but I found there was very little else to do. I'd love to see some more enemy patrols, events, just something more. There are some events that'll spawn every once in a while, but it never felt like it was often enough. Third, water. Water. What seems like it could be a really cool idea, transitioning flawlessly from flight to swimming, is anything but flawless. As soon as you hit the water, the controls suddenly become floaty, pun intended, and confusing. When trying to look up, down, or any direction, you'll find yourself flung to one side or the other, and end up looking at a wall rather than the direction you'd like to go. Much like flying, you do get used to it after a while, but it never feels natural or fun. Fourth, content. I've said this a lot in my past 2 or 3 videos, but it's becoming a constant state for me. I'm worried there's not going to be enough content here. I blew through what the demo had to offer in about 3 hours, and it would have been less if I didn't have to restart the game before every mission. Now, I didn't try taking on the higher difficulties until much later. Watch the video in the description for footage of that. No surprise here, harder difficulties make things harder. But I think Anthem could easily run into the problem of not having enough for players to do. It's an issue all PvE games face. At its core, Anthem is a PvE looter-shooter. Kill enemies to get better loot, to kill stronger enemies, to get better loot, to kill stronger enemies, and so on. Repeating the same content, only harder, might not appeal to some folks. So Anthem needs to make sure there's a lot for people to do. And that's about it. I'm sure I've forgotten something in here, but I played the game for like 20 hours over the weekend. I am really tired, I am bound to miss something. Overall, I found Anthem to be fun, but nothing you haven't really seen before. The flying is enjoyable, but I don't think it adds enough to make me recommend it to someone who doesn't enjoy looter shooters. If you enjoyed Destiny, Warframe, Borderlands, or even Firefall, I'd suggest giving Anthem a look. If you didn't enjoy those games, then there's not going to be much here for you. However, this demo did a good job of convincing me that I do plan on playing and covering the actual game once it launches in February. So perhaps my opinion will change once everything's in. That's it, that's all I got. I'm going to bed. Bye. And that was Anthem the VIP Demo. All water levels. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button for future videos. If you want, you can follow me on social media and Twitch for my weekly live streams. And if you really want to help the channel, consider donating $1 through Patreon like these other amazing people. I'd be their Colossus if you catch my drift.